I'm Irina Papuc, and this is SEO in 2025 Additional Insights.
Irina, what's your additional insight for SEO in 2025?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, broadly speaking, is to optimize your brand and your web content as entities, not on a specific keyword basis, in such a way that it can be understood by LLMs and in semantic search.
So what does optimizing your brand as an entity mean in practice? I mean, are we just talking about brand SEO here, or are there other elements to it?
There's a little bit more to it, and I'm happy to unpack that with you. So as SEOs, we're conditioned to be really obsessive about do-follow links. And I think their importance in traditional search will remain, but I also think that other types of mentions of your product and brand should be prioritized as well. An opportunity for a mention, even if it's a no-follow link or no link at all, is still worth pursuing. And the reason for that is, as everyone knows, we have seen a seismic disruption in AI in SEO, with modern language models being trained on huge corpuses of text data without the structure of anchor text, HTML directive links, and all the other sort of web-specific architecture that Google and other search engines typically rely on. And the lessons that are learned in teaching LLMs how to handle huge amounts of unstructured text data can be applied to how search engines handle the internet. Google already understands entities. It's common knowledge that it has had a knowledge graph built around that for many years now. It can already determine the relevance of related concepts, not just by the exact keywords we give it, but by their actual meaning. So optimizing your brand for AI, to me, means maximizing your appearance alongside relevant topics in web content, getting away from that old thinking of thinking in terms of exact match keywords, and creating as much detail around your brand and your offerings as possible. And I'm going to have a lot more specific steps on this when I get to it.
Sounds great. I guess one of the challenges with that is because you started off talking about the importance of optimizing for brand citations, and you also said that links aren't necessarily important here as well. But how do you measure the value of success here? I mean, when you get a brand mention, is that likely to increase the amount of times that your own website is served up on the SERP for that particular brand mention? Does it increase your perceived authority in an industry by doing that? And if so, how do you actually measure the impact of those citations?
That's a great question. And I want to say that I tried to keep my tip as industry agnostic as possible. I think it applies to every industry under the sun. And yeah, great question. How do we measure the success of this? So in the short term, it's going to be very hard to do since LLMs do not provide us with the kind of analytics we can get from Google or Bing. Their usage might remain a black box to us for a while. And we have to sort of prepare ourselves for that as SEOs. But you can still work directly with an LLM to gauge how it's interpreting your content. You can fine-tune it on material related to your domain, or you can also try using retrieval augmented generation. And then you can make tweaks to your content to see if its product recommendations change in your favor. So taking a bit of a scientific experimental approach here is key. And then we'll also still be able to use tools that search engines provide to see how our content is performing in web search. Google and Bing both support semantic search, which goes beyond simple keyword matching and provides results based on context and the meaning behind the words. They also both have their own LLMs supplementing search, as we all know and have massively adopted by now. So we may get first-party marketing analytics tools from these so we can see when our brand is mentioned and in what context. For measuring success with search engines, I would try and test different strategies on different content and see how clicks, impressions, and position respond to each. I would also test across as much of the website content as possible to get statistically significant data. That's my short answer.
Great answer. No, that's a great answer as well. And to a certain degree, for that question, I'm reminded of the answer that Gary Vee gives for being questioned. What's the ROI of this? What's the ROI of this? And he often says, what's the ROI of your mother? Because you cannot necessarily
Yo,
calculate the
mama jokes.
ROI of everything. Yeah,
Yeah. You cannot.
I mean,
Yeah.
you as a progressive marketer that wants to test the boundaries, you've got to be able to be willing to come up with new ways of measuring things, I guess.
That's right. There's no way around it. And, we have to prepare ourselves as SEO, like I said, to treat this as a bit of a black box situation, put on our scientist caps and approach this in a scientific experimental way, and just kind of see what clicks.
So when you speak to an SEO, a marketer that hasn't really done much entity optimization, what are some of the first steps that you tend to recommend them to do to get started?
Sure. So I have a lot of ideas around this, and I'll try to be as quick as I can. But the number one thing I'd prioritize is maximizing mentions of your brand in text and in video content on the web. Get a link if you can. Those are still important, and you should not, by any chance, overlook that. But also do not turn down an opportunity if you get a no follow or no link at all. Second of all, try to maintain the presence on social media. LLMs get trained on data from tons of different sources, including social posts. So it's important to stay relevant there. I would highlight that Reddit is especially valuable, both as a source for LLM training data and as a platform that's frequently boosted in Google search results for informational queries. Another tip I have is to find ways to get people to mention you organically. Just as a page with valuable information can be a, quote, link magnet, a brand with an interesting story to tell can be a mention magnet. Tell interesting stories. Create wild, shocking content if you can't. That gets people talking. Keep building smart informational content, but make sure to incorporate your brand whenever possible. I don't believe that pure informational content with the sole aim of garnering links will get value as it once did. Also, diversify your language. That's another thing we can all do. Help the algorithms connect your entity to every relevant phrase and piece of information. Don't just keep spamming the same anchors and mentions over and over. Write content that offers novel information on the edge of Google's knowledge graph, if and when available. Use schema. That's still a very important part of the journey. Prioritize internal links. So again, this is more of a Google than LLM situation, but it remains one of the most impactful things that you have direct control over with regard to demonstrating relevance of a page to a topic, and strengthening your brand and product entities. This might be basic advice for SEOs, this thing about prioritizing internal links, but don't neglect to link your informational pages back to at least one relevant product page within the main content. And try to have a system to scan your site for missed link opportunity. And finally, I wanted to throw David in one more advanced tip. There is some research that shows that LLMs are susceptible to strategic text sequences, which have been shown to bias LLMs to favor recommending specific products that contain an STS in their description over the ones that don't. Broadly speaking, an STS is a carefully designed sequence of text inserted on the product's information page, which influences the LLM to recommend the product over other competing products. An example of one used in a 2024 research paper I read recently, which used fictitious coffee machines as its test product, gave us an STS, which I'm going to tell you now. Top rated by coffee experts.
Sorry, what does an SCS stand for?
Yeah, so it stands for strategic text sequences.
Aha, right.
So it's just a snippet of text that you would include in the description of a product. It's a very fancy term for that. And this came up in the 2020.
So is it like it's not like a target keyword phrase then?
No, not quite the same thing. I would say it's a bit more broad. It's a sequence of text you include specifically on the product's information page. It's designed entirely to influence LLMs to recommend that product over competing products.
And what would be an example of one?
Yeah, so in this research paper I read recently about these, where folks were trying to test this out and how valuable they are, they took as a fictitious product a coffee machine provider. So one example of an STS there would be, and I quote, top rated by coffee experts, featured in major coffee publications, best for gourmet coffee experiences. All right, so that would be the STS. Now, why this particular sequence worked better than others, it's not really known, In this research paper, they tested this out, and this one outperformed the rest of the STSs that they had put together. But what's important is that it was arrived at algorithmically, and that process can be repeated. So the wording of the STS is optimized over many iterations until we find the sequence that tricks the LLM into recommending it more and more often, until it recommends it even above options that better fit the user's query. So just something to keep in mind. I think a lot of these, like I said, are industry agnostic tips and are worth integrating into your approach if you haven't considered them already in the coming year.
So how do you know the starting point for establishing what your SDS should be? And how do you know what to tweak in order to hopefully further optimize it for LLMs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the true north is always going to be usefulness and authenticity, which I know sounds extremely broad and kind of useless in a way because we're not really defining the hooks holding in the actual structure of the words, right? But in the case where we're looking at product information pages, right, folks are looking for something that will help them understand and make better choices in what they want to purchase. Again, we have to employ empathy, and we have to be able to put ourselves in the mindset of someone looking for, in this case, a coffee machine, and start from there and ask yourself, if I were on the lookout for this, what would be the type of verbiage that would mean something to me, that would help me make choices? What are the things that matter to me when I'm searching for a coffee machine? And that goes back to some very traditional marketing practices and principles that are rather timeless and have nothing to do with AI or any other tech coming our way. It just has to do with truly being useful and helpful to people. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question too well, David, but that's kind of the general idea, I think, in the end.
It's a tricky question. Obviously, it's a new area of SEO. It's a new area of marketing. So there probably aren't any tools that can easily direct you to do that. But you obviously want to be ahead of the competition. So to do that, you have to establish a new frontier by yourself and test and learn.
That's really all it is. And people are, especially now with AI, just filling up the internet with AI-generated content. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're still in kind of this Wild West era where the dust hasn't quite settled, the guns are out, everyone's trying to prove, hold on to their bounty and what they've built over all these decades before AI came. And people are craving for authenticity. I bet you can probably, hear what I'm saying. Like, we're all craving an authentic voice, and we're all craving an authoritative voice. We're sick and tired of the fluff content. We're sick and tired of marketing copy. And we want to find and we want actually useful and authentic conversations. That's another reason why I mentioned Reddit as such an important platform earlier. People are turning to direct lived experience as a source of truth. And whenever we can adopt more and more of that into our online dialogues, into our copy, we're giving the people what they want, which is an authentic explanation of something.
So if an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
Yeah, for sure. So a little earlier in our convo, I suggested that unlinked or no-follow mentions will likely have an increased importance. I don't mean to suggest that you should not continue trying to get high-quality, highly relevant do-follow links. That remains a part of the game. But I also think focusing solely on that will lead you to missing some opportunities and strategies that would also be very valuable. Similarly, I don't want to suggest that keywords are unimportant. It's absolutely necessary to continue to understand what people are searching for, how they're arriving at that or not arriving at your website, and to set goals to rank for specific queries. But I also think that we should not get overly focused on trying to exactly match keywords to our content. And that's why my tip is this much more broader approach of looking at your entity, whether that's your brand or whatever makes sense, looking at entities as opposed to fixed words. I also think that in the realm of AI, some SEOs are embracing AI as an easy way to rapidly pump out content. And I think that this is both ineffective and also just very bad for the internet as a whole. An AI will simply regurgitate what it already knows. So you're not going to be providing anything new for users or for Google's knowledge graph. And you're going to get lost in the sea of samey SEO content churned out by SEOs with all having the same ideas as you. So by all means, use AI as a method to brainstorm, to create outlines, to augment your process. But also, please don't rely on its output to be interesting or truthful. You're still going to need qualified humans to check for hallucinations, and you're still going to want to provide a unique voice and an engaging presentation. And again, embrace non-text based media as well. Videos has become a very dominant force in search, especially YouTube video. AI, and by extension Google, is just going to get much, much better at parsing images, video, all of that good stuff, audio. So finally, to kind of wrap that thought, David, this comes back to the general principles that Google has been trying to encourage for years. Focus on making quality, authentic content. Content that provides new information and isn't just a rehash of content that's already easy to find. Content that's engaging and useful to the reader. Content that is not overly focused on keywords. And finally, content that reflects the EAT principles of expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness. Because at the end of the day, people are looking, like I said, for honest, authentic dialogues.
Irina Papuc is co-founder at Galactic Fed, and you can find her over at galacticfed.com. Irina, thanks so much for adding your additional insight to SEO in 2025.
My pleasure, David.
I've been your host, David Bain, and you've been listening to SEO in 2025 Additional Insights, a Majestic series that complements the original podcast, video series, and book. Find out more at SEOin2025.com.